Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury.
And I'm Nick Amaral.
And welcome to Ask the Tech Coach. This is episode number 43. Today we're celebrating our March Tech Coach Roundtable. Today we're going to be wrapping up everything that we've been discussing this month, all about branding. We've been talking a lot, Nick, over the last few weeks about our Tech Coach brand. We've had a ton of questions, Nick. What have you enjoyed about talking all about branding and some of the things that maybe people have said to you online?
Jeff, I think what was pretty cool was we had a lot of tech coaches to be reaching out and asking us, about how do they get started? What should they look forward to? Everything from building a site to what certification should they look at, taking, and does that make a difference, in building their brand?
That is certainly right. We've been doing a lot of stuff like that in our Mastermind, talking not only about how to be a tech coach, but really how to get that tech coaching job. And we've been blending that a little bit with the social media, with the website, with the resume. We have had a great time putting all that together. We want to know what you guys have been thinking about our content. If you are out there listening to this show, thank you so much for making TeacherCast a part of your professional development. Of course, you can reach out to us each and every week on Twitter at AskTheTechCoach. Leave us a voice message over at teachercast.net/voicemail and email us at feedback@teachercast.net. This is Ask the Tech Coach. Keep your questions coming. We would love to hear from you. Nick, I am extremely excited about today's show. We have three amazing guests that not only are great educators, but they've also done a pretty darn good job at building a globally recognized brand for themselves. Are you excited about today's show, Nick?
I am, and I think this is going to be great for any of the people that are, we're listening and reaching out about how to build it and just getting it, straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. I mean, we're going to, find out what kind of made them tick and how they went about building their brands to make it something that's recognizable and some of the important strategies to go about.
So let's just dive right in here. I want to bring on our first guest, a fellow New Jersey person, Mr. Chris Aviles, the teched up teacher himself. Chris, how are you today? Welcome to the show.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. How's it going?
It is great. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Chris Aviles?
Sure. I like to say I'm a recovering high school English teacher. I taught high school English for 10 years. And then I got to the opportunity to go to the district I'm at now, Fairhaven School District. And, I started out doing some tech coaching. And then I had a makerspace in the afternoon that kind of grew. And so they asked me to make it a full day, full grade kind of class. So I started a program called Fairhaven Innovates, where I added entrepreneurship to the makerspace. And so my 6th, 7th, and 8th grade classes, we run real businesses together that try to turn a real profit while we solve real problems. And now in the afternoon, I work with 4th and 5th graders in the makerspace on things like design thinking, engineering, computer science, and the digital arts.
I absolutely love this because you are going to be sharing with us not only how you've created a brand for yourself, but how you're helping your students to create a brand for themselves. So I'm looking forward to a little bit about that. I want to also bring on a good friend of mine, the author, creator of the Ditch That Textbook website, book, coffee mug, everything out there. Ditch That Textbook. Matt Miller, how are you today? Welcome to the show.
Always a pleasure to be on the show and to hang out with you all.
Thank you so much for being here. It is so exciting to have you. I know you are doing so much good stuff in this world. Tell us a little bit about who is Matt Miller.
Yeah, so I was a high school Spanish teacher for 11 years. And just a few years into that, I started to realize that my textbooks were not really helping my students to become better speakers of Spanish. So I basically ditched them. I quit using them and started to find other things that were more effective and more efficient at helping my students learn, other than those textbooks. And so after I started doing that for a little while, I started to realize, hey, I probably have some things that might be helpful to other people. So I started a blog and started sharing some of those ideas with some of those other people. And one thing led to another. And, there was a book and all of this good stuff. And so here we are today, just still focusing on trying to help other teachers be the best teachers that they can be.
I love the idea of having an idea to help teachers, growing it into a brand, building the website, creating the book, doing the conferences. And that's exactly what our next guest is. He is the reigning, defending, undisputed, I think I'm getting this right, Mike, the undisputed keynote speaker of ISTE from last year. My good friend, the tech rabbi, Michael Cohen. How are you today?
I'm doing quite well. Yeah, that's quite a title. I appreciate that.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is the Tech Rabbi?
So I got into education about 10 years ago. I started actually out thinking that I would be a creative director and run a marketing and branding, just overall creative communication company. I did that for about 3-4 years. And long story short, fell into education, fell in love with it, and never looked back.
That's awesome. And you know, the Tech Rabbi persona, of course, came from where, Mike?
So the Tech Rabbi, I don't know, does it look like me? Let's see if I can get this up here.
Looks wonderful.
Looks right there. Yeah, I don't know if there's video or audio exclusively with this process, but I was holding up a sticker for those that are listening. So the Tech Rabbi came about in a way that I felt I needed to differentiate myself. Started speaking at different conferences and realizing that there are a lot of people who are doing great things, and sometimes it is difficult to stand out in a very loud space on social media, at conferences, and I figured I had to come up with something. So I am a rabbi. I'm super into tech. So I figured, like Facebook and Instagram, I would Tech Rabbi, smash them together and see if it would stick. And someone once told me if not everyone will agree with you, but no one's going to ever forget you, right? Because it's just a memorable brand. And yeah, thank God it's doing well for me.
And you've been doing amazing since we last saw each other. You recently also had a publication come out. Tell everybody what they can find now in the local bookstores. So
I launched a book released on the 1st of January, Educated by Design. And the book focuses on how to reveal the creative capacity that we all have in ourselves and our students, and the sort of the framework and the journey of what you need to be thinking about and what you need to be doing to become better creative problem solvers. And that book was an evolution of major focuses on ed tech and just, tech conferences, and everything was about tech, and myself seeing education as really, or not education, but education technology evolving and really needing to become a tool that just fits in to the way in which we solve problems. And hopefully, people have been into it. They tell me on the internet that they like it. So, it's hard to say that my book is awesome. It's like an awkward, kind of sentence to say, but fortunately, people have been sharing that.
I think it's a great book. And of course, if you're looking to pick it up and pick up any of Matt's publications as well, we're going to have all the links over here. This is, of course, Ask the Tech Coach, episode number 43. You can check everything out over at askthetechcoach.com. We've been talking a lot about branding, and we've been getting a lot of questions here. So I want to kind of throw off our first question here. And it really is this. When you're starting out, is it okay to create just a website and run with it? Or did you guys have a plan to create a brand that you're then going to basically, as Michael said, be a way to differentiate yourself? Like, Matt, did you just create this as a little side project that kind of exploded? Or did you really think this out with the colors and the brand and the trash can and where was your mind when you first got started?
My mind was that I was a journalist before I was a teacher, and I liked to write. And I just wanted to write. So I signed up for a free WordPress.com blog, and I just had the itch to write and to try to help other people. And so my first website was hideous. It had a word cloud as its logo. I remember writing an ed tech haiku as one of my first blog posts. Not even kidding. And so it was, the beauty of it. See, I've heard people say that the wonderful thing about starting a blog is that nobody's paying attention, and the horrible thing is that nobody's paying attention. Nobody's paying attention, so that means you can make all the mistakes you want. You can really work at finding your own true writer's voice through trial and error. But then, of course, that means that it feels like nobody's paying attention. So, and with me, with that WordPress.com blog, I decided to upgrade and go on to something else. And I just stumbled into the yellow and black and the font that I have and the trash can logo and everything, I just put something together. I thought, I quit using my textbooks. I'm just going to try this and see if it works. And I've seen other people that have created brands where they've done a complete rebranding at some point, and that's okay too. But for me, I just kind of stuck with it because I wanted some consistency and I wanted people to kind of know what I stood for. And so I've just kind of stood by it throughout the years.
So was it something where you created this concept and then over the years you improved upon it, or over the years maybe you found somebody to do some of the artwork for it, or is this all on your hands, your design right now?
Well, the trash can logo is free clip art I found on Google. For real, not even kidding, like public domain clip art. That's what the trash can logo is. And now it's turned into like buttons, and it's on a coffee mug and what other things. I've got some stickers right here. So yeah, the font is Showcard Gothic font. It happened to be a font that was on my Windows laptop at the time, and I thought it worked. So I just kind of stuck with it. So really, yeah, it was just kind of falling into it.
I'm sitting here laughing at that speech, Matt, because that is so hitting home right now. I will never forget, again, July 11th, 2011, it's 3 a.m. and I'm looking at iconarchive.com. And that's how I found the original Apple, the original mortarboard, the original logo, everything just came from free icon. Cause you got to start somewhere, right? Like you can't just build these things and do it. And not everybody has artistic ability. However, Michael, you're pretty good with a pen, right? And I am looking at your Tech Rabbi stuff. You've got a really neat logo. I love your stickers. The color is good. Talk to us a little bit about your branding or your branding package. How did that come to be?
So I think the first piece before I answer that is you have to establish a value that you want to provide. And then all of these other things become part of that value. And so they might resonate even if they aren't the most, detailed, high quality, $1 million design firm type creations. For me, I wanted to, sort of go with this unique look that I've been told I have. I stand out. It's hard for me to hide at conferences. I don't blend in. I got, big black rimmed glasses, a giant beard, and a keep on my head. And I thought, okay, let's see what that, that goes, how that works out. Threw some super thin Helvetica new font in front of it, a little starburst in the back for some sparkle and pizzazz, and just kind of let the value that I wanted to bring speak for it. And then the logo just kind of go. Now, it also happened to help that I went to art school. So I have a little bit of a ingrained in me sort of approach to design that probably was also a deciding factor. But I think it's just important, we heard that from Matt, is like the last thing that you want to start with is your logo. The first thing you want to start with is actually like, what's that unique value that you're going to bring to the table?
That is such good news and all of that stuff. And we're going to talk a little bit as we go through on content strategy, content creation. Chris, give me a little bit of your advice on here. When people meet you, I know you've got a very big footprint. Do people meet you and say, hey, it's Chris Aviles? Or do they say, hey, it's that teched up teacher guy? Or how has your brand and your kind of presence been created over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so I think it's funny is probably a little bit different of a road than most people is I kind of built the plane while it was flying. And I remember when I came up with the name Teched Up Teacher, I was actually bouncing in a club and some of the other bouncers were watching Jacked Up on ESPN. And I was like, oh, Teched Up. Because for me, the idea of starting a website was super selfish. I was really getting into gamification and alternate reality games. And a lot of the writing, the early writing especially, was for me to keep track of what I was doing and how I was doing it and why I was doing it. And so I started it from a place of the only person I was concerned of, writing for was myself. And I keep a lot of that with me today because I would say, much more than Michael and Matt, I think the work that I do is very niche. And I think that's kind of for a specific reason. And that's really to keep the passion going. But because of social media, when people I meet, because it's like, you guys know, it's like one of those things where you know people, but you don't know people. You know them from Twitter, you know them from Facebook, but you haven't actually met in person. And so a lot of times it's, kind of teched up teacher. And even when I came up with that idea, it never ever occurred to me that I could be Chris Aviles. I always thought I had to have like a persona. I had to have like a projection, or I had to have this thing that was like a representation of my ideas. And so, very early on in the website, which has been going for 6 or 7 years now, it was always about teched up teacher. And I always thought of it as an idea or a movement rather than about me and myself. And so I know, when I meet people the first time, especially, like places like ISTE or bigger conferences, that's kind of like, oh, you're teched up teacher. I know you on Twitter. Or, a lot of people forget my name is Chris, or a lot of people, don't know me as a person, but maybe they've, tapped into a couple of the ideas that I had. And I like it. I mean, I think that's kind of cool.
And it's interesting that you say that. These are things that we talk about often. Mike, I want to get your opinion on this, because we've talked about this, right? On one hand, you've got, the tech rabbi, which is kind of a persona, but it's you. I mean, people look at the image, they see the face, they see the beard, they see everything, and so they know that that's you. On the other hand, you've got ditch that textbook with the trash can. How do you know that ditch that textbook is this wonderful person over here? How do you make that distinction? Mike, what's your thought on that? If you're looking to create a brand or start something or kind of dive into this world, do you recommend creating something around the person or around the, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but gimmick around the branding thing there?
So I would say it's person versus organization branding. For me, I've put myself at a slight disadvantage, which is, the notoriety or whatever that exists around the work I do, is people are looking for me. So if I bring you all on my team, like how does that work? It's like there's the tech rabbi, but then like you're creating content, or it doesn't really line up if you want other people to be part of your group in a forward-facing way. For a Ditch That Textbook, that could become a company with Matt as the CEO at the helm, and just build that out, and other people could create around the values, I guess, of the Ditch That Textbook. So it's just a difference between personal branding and organizational branding. You can build a company around a personal brand. Gary Vee does it. And even though he'll say like he runs a media company, he does that as well. But the personal brand is really what's built the empire over the past 3 or 4 years. So I don't think that one has a more of a pro, more of a con. I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses. And just for me, it's really how do I expand?
Nick, it's an interesting situation here, because we've got a lot of tech coaches and a lot of non-tech coaches here reaching out to us over these last couple shows saying, I don't want to be the next tech rabbi. I don't want to be the next ditch that textbook, but I want to create enough of a ripple so that way maybe an employer can get a chance to notice me, or maybe I could have some kind of clout to get into the Google Teacher Academy, or to get into Apple Distinguished, or anything like that. What do you think about all this stuff? I mean, if you're out there, and many people in our mastermind are looking at getting started in the tech coach field or on social media, what advice do you have for them as far as just getting that foot wet?
Yeah, I think going back to kind of what Mike and Chris and Matt even said it too. I think it all starts with that, finding that unique kind of asset that you bring, that niche or that area where you have built kind of this skill set or these experiences that you kind of have the knowledge that you can then kind of share with others. And I think when you start to build that platform, you start to build a little bit of a following of people that, start to look at the things that you are doing and recognize that. So I think just being kind of consistent to that, to build that brand around that idea is key. I know with Chris and gamification, when I was, back in the classroom, roughly 5 years ago or so, and teaching high school English, Chris was one of the guys I reached out to because, I was looking for ways to totally revamp my my classroom, and gamification was a focus for me. So what better than reach out to someone who has been doing that now for, probably a couple of years before I was really taking the plunge, and he built that niche, and he built the following. And I think, at least with me now, I'm taking that gamification approach, and I've been doing a lot with PD, and I like trying to apply the gamification aspect to PD, and trying to revamp professional development in schools in that way. So I think that's it. Build that find that uniqueness, find that niche, and try to share the skills that you've now gathered and applied over the years.
Now, Matt, I'm sitting here looking at your website, ditchthattextbook.com, and you've got a very distinct look, but more importantly, you've got a very distinct content strategy, right? One that's taken you certainly for multiple publications, and now you've got Twitter chats, and all these wonderful things are happening. Could you talk a little bit about how your I want to just create a blog turned into what we're looking at today? How do you choose the content? How do you choose the topics? Where do you go with all of that stuff? That way people keep coming back and knowing that when I go to ditchthattextbook.com, I'm going to see this.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that have gone to it. One of them is that from the beginning, I really committed to creating content and showing up on a regular basis. That was really important to me because I wanted people to know when things were going to show up, and they knew that I was going to bring it every single week. So from a really early point in my blogging career, I was posting a new post on Monday and on Thursday. I was doing 2 posts a week, which was a lot while I was still teaching Spanish. But what that also meant was that I went beyond the hobby blogger to being committed. And see, I think the hobby blogger is the person who says, I'm just going to have a blog, and whenever I feel inspired, I'm going to write something. And here's what I found happens when you say you're only going to write when you're inspired. You start on that first week and you're really inspired, and you write 2 or 3 posts your very first week. The next week, it might be 1 or 2 posts. And then the week after that, it's 1 post. And then it's 2 weeks before you post again. And then you're done for a couple of months, because life gets in the way, And what I decided to do, based off of suggestions of other bloggers, was that I was going to come and bring my best every Monday and every Thursday, whether I was inspired or not. And the crazy thing about that too is that sometimes you bring whatever you can bring for that day, and you're not super excited about the idea, but it resonates with people. It's crazy. Sometimes the things that I don't think are my best ideas are the things some people are really looking for. Then there are other days where I'm like, this is my opus. This is going to change people's lives. This is going to be fantastic. I put it out there, crickets. So I think part of it is showing up showing up on a regular schedule and letting people know when to expect you. And then the nice thing about that is it gets you practice, but it also helps you to see what resonates with your audience. And so as you build that up, you start to see what people like, and also what matches you as a person, and you kind of go from there, I think.
So there's 2 ways of looking at this, right? There's looking at it as, I'm going to create content for myself because I like talking about it and it makes me happy. Thank you. And then there's also the idea of, I'm going to create content, as you said, that resonates with your audience. You look at your stats and you say, if somebody's going to be really hitting this post, I'm going to write more of that. How do you find that balance between self-gratification and supporting your audience that comes to see you?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Comes down to intention. So in that way, what are you in it for? Are you in it as a reflection tool? Like, do you want to reflect on what you're doing in class? There is nothing wrong with that. There's lots of people that have blogs that write for themselves as the audience. Or are you wanting to serve a particular group of people? And what's great is whenever you can find the intersection of those two, I think. So if you can find something that is your unique, true voice in a way that you can serve a certain audience, then you've got that sort of nexus where those two things come together. And that's, for me, that's what I was really looking for from the beginning.
Mike, where are you in that? Because, again, you just created your book. This just came out in the beginning of January. All the links are going to be over on our show notes. Ask the Tech Coach 43. Is this a book for you? Is this a book for your audience? Or somewhere in the middle?
So the book is written for the person that really is trying to figure out how to empower their students in this very buzzy word of creativity. Now, that person is not me. All the advice that I received and all the books I read, I even read a book about how to write a book. You are not the audience that you're writing for. If you are, just write yourself love letters. You have to imagine that person that is sitting in their classroom saying, I wish I had something to do to figure this out, or I wish that I knew more about it, or maybe they don't even realize the bigger picture, but there's something in the book that's going to resonate and reveal that out. But the book is absolutely my own personal journey, my own personal experiences in my classrooms, supporting students as a classroom educator, as an administrator, as a consultant, traveling the country. But you have to have a person when you're writing a book. I think a book is different, very different than a blog post, very different than social media content that you put out. It really has to be something that is going to stand there. You can't update the book. I mean, you could write a new version, but once you're holding my book, like that's it. You can't send them version 10.3.1.
So let's talk a little bit about the thing that the book sits on, or the thing that the blog sits on. Chris, you and I have had a lot of conversations about websites, web design. What does it look like? Talk to me a little bit about Tech Up Teacher. How did you get to be looking at it from the way that it is? Did you create it for yourself? Did you create it for your audience? Tell us a little bit about your web strategy. And I'm dying to hear from what Michael and Matt are saying about this. But Chris, give me your strategy.
It's funny is I'll even start with a quick story. I remember when I was first, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, thinking about taking the website more seriously, I actually reached out to Matt and I was talking to him on Twitter. And I was trying to say, I love your website. Like, how did you do it? Where's your style? And so, whether it was for Matt or you, Jeff, just kind of getting ideas from different experts and different people in the field and, how they run their website and what they look for. And I know, like, you and I have had a lot of late night conversations. You've been super generous about helping me out as somebody who, again, I'm building this plane while I'm flying it. But what happened was starting the blog, similar to Matt, started down the free WordPress route. And I'd say maybe 3 or 4 years into the blog, starting to get some emails. Hey, would you come talk at this conference? Hey, would you come talk at our school? And so it kind of went for where I was applying and asking to do those things. People started to ask me. And so that's when I decided to start, taking things a little bit more seriously. I kind of updated the website. That's, I think when we first started talking, we've known each other a lot longer, but, I think it was that time that I started to reach out to like you and Matt and kind of say, hey, how are you doing this stuff? And, learning about just different intricacies of how to run a website and content, creation and what makes a good blog post and how do you, keep people coming back to reading more and learning about, how long people, how to get people to spend more time reading articles and how many articles they read before they leave. And I think part of that, though, oddly, is the fact that like I'm super into data and that stuff like really fascinates me. And so, I have, Google AdWords and I have all the Google dashboards and the WordPress dashboards. And, I have a bunch of different trackers that tracks, almost anything you can imagine. And I'm always just kind of doing pivot tables and comparing month to month and year to year. And, seeing the growth of the website is always something that kind of gets me excited. And so, I think for me, part of that was realizing that instead of, again, bouncing at clubs in the summer, whatever I was doing, like this could be an opportunity for me to make a little bit of money on the side so I can support my family on top of a teaching salary. But then the other part was just really kind of being into data and growth and analytics. Really those two things are what kind of drove me to take everything a little bit more seriously.
And how do you feel about that, Matt? Are you a go with the flow, or do you have your analytics dashboards up there constantly trying to figure out what your next move is?
I wish that I need to get Chris on board with me. Like I've got some lessons I think I can learn from Chris on this. I keep track of the statistics on my blog posts and on my YouTube videos and all of that. So I keep an eye on that to some extent. Some of it also just has to do with a little bit of my gut feeling on what my audience wants to hear. And so I guess the question that begs is, how do you know what your audience wants to hear? And I think, Michael, as you were talking about this to some extent, there was something when you were saying with the book, you have to have somebody to write it for. For me, I've taken the same approach to blogging. I've heard people talk about writing for their avatar, and their avatar is the, sort of like sample person out of their audience that is representative of the whole group. And so for me, through doing presentations and through writing and meeting people, I have found that my avatar is a 40 to 50-year-old woman who teaches in the K-12 setting. She's a little bit techie, but not totally techie, and she's willing to try some stuff. I keep her in mind whenever I write posts. So I try not to put in acronyms that she's not going to know. I try not to, try to make sure that everything is fully explained so she doesn't feel in the dark. And that's another way I think that, that gets away a little bit from the analytics. So I guess I kind of play it in the middle.
Does your avatar have a name?
I need to name her. I don't know. I guess Susie is the first name that comes to mind, but that's such a typical name. I can come up with something better than that.
We are going to be right back. We're going to come back and we're going to talk all about presentations. We're going to talk about social media. We're going to talk about a little bit about graphics, and everyone's going to give their thoughts, tips, and tricks on great applications that you need to be using when looking at building your brand. This is Ask the Tech Coach, episode number 43. We will be right back in a few seconds. Friends, before we move on with our show, I wanted to let you guys know I have been in education now for almost 20 years, and I've seen the changes some students have come to face every single day, whether it's going through school hungry, not being able to see a doctor when they're sick, or not getting the proper rest at night. These challenges make it hard for kids to focus on their learning. I remember a story of a student who came to my office one day and she could barely stay awake due to all the circumstances happening around her at home that were beyond her control. I didn't know what I could do, and I wanted to be able to help her out in any way that I could. Thankfully, Concordia University in Portland is leading the way with their 3 to PhD program that helps to combat students' fears, freeing them to pursue their highest dreams. They're revolutionizing education by creating a holistic model that provides groceries, healthcare, and even clothing to students right here on campus, helping them thrive and helping our communities strengthen and grow. Concordia's College of Education offers online and on-campus programs where students have the opportunity to learn about a more compassionate approach to education and see how nurturing the whole student can lead to amazing things. To learn more about how you can help students conquer their monsters and achieve their highest dreams, visit cu-portland.edu/let's conquer. That's cu-portland.edu/let's conquer. And use the hashtag #NatureEducateGrow. And welcome back to the show. Today we're talking all about branding. We've got some great guests on here. We've got Chris Avilas from Tech Up Teacher. We got Michael Cohen, the Tech Rabbi. We've got Matt Miller, Ditch That Textbook. Nick, there's a lot of great things that are going on here in the world of branding. Of course, as we go through our mastermind, people are still asking, what should they do first? Where should they look, right? Because there's a lot of times you might go out and create something huge that that might scare people, especially in the I want to get a job, especially in the I want to keep a tight, close friendship. A lot of people might get a little bit nervous around somebody who's got this bigger persona. What's your advice for anybody out there that's looking to grow something, or maybe they stumbled on something that's really cool, but they still want to be recognized at school as just another 5th grade teacher like everybody else?
I think this part kind of scares people, is always just reaching out, is kind of putting yourself out there to reach out to those people. But, I think there's just so much that you can gain and building that personal voice, not just through social media reaching out, but, via email, getting someone on the phone, meeting up physically, and just finding out what are their tips and tricks. Jeff, so much that I'm personally getting out of this, this roundtable. And because I'm, as you know, we've been working on my site. I'm trying to undergo a kind of a website redesign and build my own. So I'm taking these tips and tricks from some of the best and trying to formulate that understanding into how do I kind of build something that is my own niche and has my own voice. And I think that's one thing I always say, coming from the English teacher in me and how I speak to my students, was always maintain that voice, find your personal voice and how you're going to, get others to recognize you wherever you are.
I still like the quote that Michael said a few minutes ago here. You're not writing an audience. Your audience is not you, right? You are not the audience. He said you're not the audience you're writing for, which I really, really like that. Guys, we've been working with Nick here on his website. We just got him a domain name, so now he's nicholasamaral.com, and we're going to start to build this up here. Let's take a moment here and do a little round robin of our favorite tools, our favorite apps, right? What do we use for graphics? What do we use for our web design? What are some of those things that you have to have with you? Chris, we've had a lot of conversations here. What are those 3 or 4 must-have that you always use or recommend, and why?
Maybe I'll give an app and a strategy. Mm-hmm. The first is Buffer. I can't live without Buffer. I don't know how I lived without Buffer before I had it. But Buffer is basically an app I have on my phone that allows me to post to multiple social media accounts at once. So I have my program, social media, fairhaveninnovates.com, right, trying to brand my program for my school. Then I have Teched Up Teacher. And so I can post to all 6 of those accounts with one, click of a button, basically. And so for me, having formally have done that manually, that's been really, a blessing. To be able to use Buffer has been fantastic. And I think a strategy that's worked very well, I guess that can also be considered maybe like an app. But I wrote the gamification guide because I was getting so many emails from people asking kind of questions. I decided to put it all together in a free resource for people. But using MailChimp to have people sign up to get a copy of that has really helped grow my following. And so the gamification guide, started out getting maybe a couple downloads here and there. It's getting 200, 300, 400, 500 downloads every couple months now. And that helps me grow, my mailing list and let people know when I have a new blog post up, or, Matt and I and a few others are going to have a really great session at ISTE this year, kind of saying where I'm going to be. And so that's been fantastic, is turning that gamification guide and using it to build a mailing list. So I can just kind of let people know what I'm up to. So, those 2 things have really probably helped me grow the most over the last 2 years.
I like that idea. We are big fans of Buffer here, and we're certainly big fans of having some kind of a content opt-in or something. Michael, what do you do? What are your go-to apps? What are those things that you always have to have around?
So my confession is that I'm way less organized as far as strategy. It's hard to run the brand and be a director of innovation and be a father of 4 kids, 9, 8, 6, and 4 years old. So I got to be, Buffer for sure is something that is definitely a saver because of the content. But I'm really into short on time kind of strategies. And it's hard because I've been using Adobe Photoshop since I was 15 years old. So the Adobe Spark platform, I think, is absolutely incredible. I've recently fallen in love with Adobe Rush and iMovie. I'm a big fan of Apple. But the reason I mention these 3 is because they all can be utilized on this phone. I don't have time for my laptop, my desktop. I got all these different devices. I want to just be able to create content right in my hand right now. And I think that for many people, that's a really valuable asset because most of us have smartphones these days, right? Is that like a fair statement? I don't want to be too cutting edge. Like, we all have smartphones, right? So it's how can we, when it's video content, can I record, edit, and ship out video content to Instagram stories, to YouTube? Can I get graphics that are on Instagram and then with this, literally the click of a button, snap to the Twitter size, and then it's a YouTube thumbnail all on my phone? Can I do all that on my phone? So if that can be done, then I think that's something that's valuable for others. For me to share right now, like I'm using Final Cut Pro and doing all of these like high-end things, like I don't think that's helpful for the listeners. So Adobe Spark, super simple for post-video creation, Adobe Rush, and your camera app. The camera app is the most powerful app on the device.
I love that idea. Matt, what are your go-tos?
One for me has got to be MailChimp. So this is something that I committed to from a very early time, is that I wanted to be able to provide value to my readers through their email. And the nice thing about that is you don't have to worry about a platform changing. The Facebook algorithm changes, no big deal. Twitter, something weird happens with Twitter and they change the way that they do business. No big deal, because I own my own email list. People have opted into me and not into a social media platform. And so being able to send them emails of the new stuff that I'm up to and things that can help them out has been huge. And of course, what that also means is that in addition to providing them value, I can also let them know, if I have a book out, if I'm doing speaking gigs, and if I have some openings. The amazing thing I found too is that it's like the rule of reciprocity. Like you give to people, you bring enormous value to people, and all of a sudden they want to give back in return. Michael mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk earlier. He calls that the thank you economy. It's the idea of giving so much that people want to give back to you as a thank you. And so that's my direct line of communication with people, is to do that. And I found to grow that, if I give them something that is worthwhile to them for free in exchange for their email address, that gets them really interested in signing up. So for me, for the longest time, it's been a free ebook. Some people do it as checklists. It doesn't have to be anything enormous, but if you can establish something with a quick win right there, give them something that can really get them going, that can be huge. So for me, I'd say my email system is probably the biggest.
I couldn't agree with you more. We've been talking a lot about that. We've been doing a lot of blog posts about that. We're actually working right now at TeacherCast Labs on a branding workbook that we're actually going to go backwards, and we're going to be adding that branding workbook to all of these different branding podcasts and whatnot. And we're going to start to talk a little bit about conferences here really quickly. But I've switched my conference presentations over to, if you're in the audience and you want to sign up for the newsletter, I'll give you something special just for that conference. Maybe it's branded, maybe it's got the logo of the conference, but that way, it's one more way to say thank you for being here and thank you for coming to my session and getting to, like, earn, and trust me here. There's a lot of different things that we can have here. I know we're getting short on time, and there's a ton of different things here, Nick, that we there's so many different topics here, but I wanted to, just because this is a tech coach show, could you guys give us maybe one or two thoughts on conferences? Many tech coaches have talked to us over the last few months on, how do I get accepted into ISTE? How do I get speaking gigs? How do I get found? All of those kind of branding things. Let's just do this one real quick before we get into our last topic here, probably the most one. Mike, I'm going to leave you for last year because you've got a very, very special story that I like here. But Chris, what's your thought process here? What's your tips and tricks on conferences and getting selected?
A big thing for me is talk to as many people as possible. Is hard for me because it wasn't necessarily my personality, especially in the beginning, was just to walk up to people, ask them how they're doing, introduce myself. And so I found, kind of having to start out maybe doing some conferences for free and stuff like that. Afterwards, the networking turned out to be the most important part. And so now it's common when I go out and I speak, and, you guys know how it is afterwards. People want to come up, they want to kind of talk to you, exchanging business cards, networking, and doing that kind of stuff is really important. And so I always want to make sure that I'm being as open and friendly as possible. And so for somebody, I'm kind of an introvert. That was hard for me at first, but it's made all the difference. And I think the other thing too is, so often we don't think we're good enough. I always say, I'm my own worst enemy. going back to like blogging for a second, I don't really like anything that I write. And so I even have to like set rules for myself where like I won't reread or proofread anything more than 3 times, because I'll sit there and tear myself apart all day. And so having hard rules like that has really helped me kind of open up and explore more. And so just understanding that your ideas and what you bring to the table, you have value. And it took me, probably 2 or 3 years of doing different conferences to realize that. And I think even Nick and I have had the conversation, even Jeff and I, we've had this conversation, making that transition from doing conferences for free to doing conferences for money. Especially now where for the most part, unless it's for friends, I'll only speak at conferences for money. That's kind of a big transition too. And knowing what you're worth and knowing that you bring value and kind of sticking to that and being confident with you and your brand and your talent and stuff like that. I mean, that was big for me too, is just knowing what you bring to the table is probably fantastic, even if you don't see it yet. Because it took me a long time to really believe that I had something special to add, especially, sometimes I get on my soapbox on Twitter or just with it's, when we're talking at conferences, I feel like there's a lot of like signal to noise issues when it comes to like Twitter and just kind of like education in general. A lot of people are just kind of sharing like those feel good quotes and they're not putting a lot of themselves out there. And so when you see these big, these big conference speakers and they have the big following and they have the big, followers, comparing yourself to them can be scary. And so kind of just knowing that everybody kind of started out in the same place and knowing what value you bring and knowing that you have a story to tell and everybody has something to bring to the table is really important. So I think the networking and kind of, making sure that I meet and get to meet as many people as possible, along with just kind of being confident in who I am and what I bring to the table, were probably the 2 biggest things that made a difference for me.
And that's such good advice. And we've talked about a lot of that, of just having that confidence out there to know your value. Matt, talk to us a little bit about your strategies. Because, I mean, you go to ISTEs, you go to Qs, you've done a lot of keynoting. How do you know the right topics? Is that just, again, going back to what does she want to read from you?
Yes, very much so. I've got a couple of quick hits that I can give you. Number one, I think you need to put yourself in the place of your attendees. And you got to see, where are they? So often you've got the people who are new to technology, that are new to the conference scene, and they may not have the same established foundation of ideas that you do. So make sure you put yourself in their place. Number 2, title is huge. The title of your presentation, especially for the attendees, maybe not so much for the selection committee, but for the attendees. They're going to go to something that's fun. They're going to go to something where they know what it's about. So be very careful about your title. Number 3, if there is a presenter packet, read it carefully as you're doing your submissions, because a lot of times they give clues for what they're looking for. Along that same line, number 4, if you're doing ISTE, I know ISTE always has this chart of how many presentations are accepted and how many are declined in every different presentation type. If you want to be selected, go to the ones that have the least representation, that have the highest acceptance rates. That's one way to go. And then number 5, I think when you're crafting those presentations, give people what they want, what they're looking for, but also give them what you think they need too. Because sometimes they'll show up for what they think they want. Those 60 apps and 60 minutes types of presentations are what people think a lot of times that they want. But maybe what they need is a little less focus on the tool and a little more focus on the teaching. If you can kind of like, I joke about it like, if I was making a meatloaf, this is like grinding up some cauliflower and mixing it into the meatloaf. It's like I'm giving you a little bit of what you need, but I'm really still also giving you what you want. So those are some of my tips for conferences.
I love those topics. Find where find where they don't have a lot of submissions and then go there. That's such a good idea. Mike, tell us a little bit about your strategy here. I mean, you've been a presenter, you've been a featured speaker. We didn't even get a chance to talk about ISTE last year, but how do you create, how do you find that right topic? How do you create buzz around your section? How do you get people to know about you and talk about you after you're finished?
So the conference approach, I think there's two types of conferences, right? So at some point, if you have been successful in creating content that resonates, so you're being invited to be featured speaker, you're being invited to keynote at districts and things like that, and there, you can basically speak whatever, talk about whatever you want, because they want to hear you, because they've already heard you in some capacity. But when you're looking at these big conferences, the ASCDs, the Qs, the different statewide ISTE affiliate conferences, ISTE itself, South by Southwest, they all have a underlying theme that you need to be aware of. And, just to show you like the honesty of the way in which they use conference committees. So I submitted 3 sessions to ISTE for Philadelphia. So number one, if you're a keynote speaker, you still have to submit. This isn't like some little like easy pass now. And I got one of my sessions that I was really excited about rejected or waitlisted, right? So you have to look, especially with ISTE, they have these ISTE standards that they have built up over the past few years, revamped last year, another round. And you want to look at those. You want to design the story around your session with those in mind. And they are clues to what it is that that you should be looking for. Now, also, as Matt said, the statistics are important. If you've spoken, at 3 conferences total, I wouldn't recommend trying to do an individual speaking session at ISTE because you haven't refined the process yet. And if you have, I want to work for you because you're like magical, So it takes time. And so poster sessions can be an opportunity to really share out. And if you're super high energy, there's hundreds of people walking around. And I've seen poster sessions that have more people engaged than general sessions with somebody in front of this big room, with a fancy stage. As far as, being memorable, I try to make my sessions hands-on. And I'm very transparent in the beginning. If you're not interested in doing something at some point in the next 45 minutes or an hour, you should go to another conference. And I'd rather have people leave than people unengaged checking their emails. So there is that piece of mine, for better or for worse, where I will storytell, I will share a little bit about my journeys, my successes, my failures, but we're going to do something in some way that represents the session topic, if it's possible. And it's not always possible. I think that, like the keynote at ISTE, that was just like total, divine providence. I mean, literally got an email from my website, like a website form fill out. Hey, we've seen your content, we want to be in touch. And I've spoken at ISTE 2014, 15, 2016, maybe I made that up. No, 17 and then at 18. So it's not like I just, became the keynote speaker. Like they had seen me before. I think that's the most important thing. If someone is trying to become one of these global, educators, that's what it really is. You have to put yourself out there. You have to do a ton of stuff for free on social media, at conferences. Hopefully you're not paying too much out of your own pocket, but you do for free, and then people will want to pay you. And that's, take that with a grain of salt, listeners. That's my own experience. That's what's worked for me. But it also, we have to pay the bills, and you can't do everything for free. I've already been banned from free stuff now from my wife. She says, you're not flying across the country, for $300. It takes time to create this content. I put my heart and soul into it. I'm away from my family. I'm traveling. It's miserable. And on the plane, I don't care if you're in business class or you're in coach, it's not necessarily a lifestyle, but if you are inspired by the idea that you can impact thousands of more students because of the work that you do, then don't hold back, because then you're robbing the world of something incredible.
Nick, this is a hard thing to follow all of that up. This is all great advice. And if anybody out there is looking for more advice like this, please find us over on Twitter. You can, of course, reach out over at Ask the Tech Coach on Twitter. Leave us a voice message over at teachercast.net/voicemail. We want to have your questions answered. We want to make sure that you guys are looking and getting what you guys need. If you have anything, we will help you guys out as we go through here. Nick, what did you learn from today's show? There's a lot of stuff that just happened here.
Yeah, this was amazing. There's a lot of information, and I'm hoping that our listeners, Jeff, can definitely. I don't know how they're only going to walk away with one. I mean, I'm checking down a list right now as I was just listening, and I thought this was terrific, and just where to start and how everyone has started from. We're all in the same boat. We've all come from similar places, and how they've built their paths to where they are today is not out of reach for anyone. And that's just got me kind of keying in on everything that they said was resonating with me in a way. And I just, Chris had said something earlier, and it was, that I'm my worst enemy, and you're always thinking about yourself, just how maybe you can't live up to the expectations of others or some of the global educators. And that was just, profound words, and just something that I think everyone jumping into tech coaching or just trying to make a name for themselves and a personal brand in education, these are things they got to follow.
Guys, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time today. It's always nice to have you guys on the show. Please invite yourself back on. We have so many more topics that we didn't get a chance to hit. We would love to have you guys out there be a guest on this show with somebody here on our panel. That way you can have your questions answered. We, of course, would love to have you on. Let's do one quick round robin. Where can we learn more about you, and how do we find all the great stuff you're doing? Chris, where do we find out more about you?
So all of my social media is at TechedUpTeacher. The blog is techedupteacher.com. You can keep up with all of my antics there.
And Michael, where can we find you these days?
The Tech Rabbi, not Tech Rabbi, the at the front. There was a squatter that's making life exciting. The Tech Rabbi on all social feeds. Twitter is the best place to reach out and really connect and have meaningful conversations. And, the podcast, the blog, everything is found on thetechrabbi.com or educatedbydesign.com.
And check out Michael's book. It is fantastic. I have a copy here. We're certainly going to have Michael back on the show soon just to talk about that book and why you guys need to be educated by design. Matt, where can we learn more about the great things that you're doing?
Probably at ditchthattextbook.com. As I was mentioning earlier, it's good to give people things for free. So I have a couple of free ebooks there. There's one called 101 Practical Ways to Ditch That Textbook that you can get. There's also another one about using Google tools. And so you can get all of that good stuff at ditchthattextbook.com/101.
Now, the person that's downloading that book, Matt, would that be Gertrude?
Yes. Her name is Gertrude. That is Gertrude. Way better than Susie.
I was going to...
Thank you, Jeff. Yes.
Scarlett would be one, maybe?
Yeah. Nope, we're going with Gertrude.
Going with Gertrude, yeah. Okay, you've heard it here, folks.
Gertie for short.
Hashtag Gertrude. Here we go. Nick, where can we learn more about you? Because I know you are going to go home this week and you are going to build your brand.
I am. I'm going to run down the list. So you can follow me on Twitter at @NAmarel.edu or check out my blog at nicholasamarel.com.
And of course, you can learn more about us over at AskTheTechCoach.com. You got 43 websites, lots of great stuff. And if you are interested in branding, we have a brand new channel out there. You can go over to educationalwebdesign.com, figure out how to make a brand new website for yourself. Or of course, you can go over to educationalpodcasting.com and learn how you guys can create a podcast just like this one for yourself or with your students. Speaking of which, if you are looking to bring podcasting into your classroom, don't forget you can head over to podcastingwithstudents.com to get some great advice on curriculum, apps, equipment, all that great stuff. Podcastingwithstudents.com. One more time, guys, I want to say thank you for being here as a guest on the show. It's always a pleasure. And I want to say thank you to you guys for making TeacherCast your home for professional development over these last 8 years. It has been absolutely amazing having you on the ride, and we are looking forward to seeing you guys at a local conference, especially in Philadelphia at ISTE. So on behalf of Nick here on the podcast and on everybody here on the TeacherCast Educational Network, my name is Jeff Bradbury.
And I'm Nick Amaral,
reminding you to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.